and welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura Presnell and I'm the founder of Balanced Bombshells, and I help women naturally balance their hormones, whether you want to get rid of PMS or period problems or you want to get pregnant. All the things with pregnancy, postpartum. I just love the hormonal life, and I'm glad you're joining me for today's video where we're going to be talking about how to track your cycle for fertility. So I kind of want to go through just some markers to look at that could help you dive a little bit deeper and just kind of understand where your body stands for fertility. And it's very simple just by using like basic math. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay, so this is July 2022, a blank month. You can certainly track this on a computer. You can use a cycle app. You can use your planner. For today's purposes, I just wanted to show you something front and center so we can look at it together. There are two markers that I want you to start keeping track of. One is when you ovulate and one is when you get your period. These are really cornerstone happenings of your cycle that are going to give us some math that can basically tell us, is your body in alignment for fertility based on what your cycle is showing, or is there something you need to dive deeper? And just by doing this simple math, it helped me on two fertility journeys of understanding where I needed to dive deeper in my cycle. So when I started trying for baby number one, my cycle was 28 days and I was ovulating on day 18, which was actually too late for a 28-day cycle. For fertility, if you've been watching any of my other videos, you want your luteal phase to be about 12 to 16 days, and mine was 10, which showcased that I was a little bit too low in progesterone for fertility. For everyday wellness, I was certainly thriving. I had no PMS. I didn't have period problems. I had a very consistent schedule. So if I wasn't trying to conceive, I honestly don't think I would have made any changes because I was feeling so good. But because I wanted to have a baby, that was just something for me to look deeper into. And so that's what I kind of want to walk you through today, of just kind of understanding the snapshot of your cycle. So let's say your period starts on July 5th. You just mark period starts, and in a cycle app, I can show you that in a minute too, of like how you can kind of track that. I usually use an app. I can't say I've used planners, but everybody's different on how they want to track their cycle. So the day your period starts is the first day of your cycle. So this would mark day one. So then let's say you ovulate around day 18. Let's do my old cycle. So I would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So day 18 is when I would get a positive ovulation test. So the way to even start tracking for ovulation, if you know that you ovulate, let's say on day 18, like I did, and you haven't really tracked ovulation before, I would start tracking ovulation, because you don't want to miss that window 5 days before you expect to ovulate. So let's say it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be like start tracking ovulation. And then you basically pee on a stick. I'll show you right here. So these are Pregmate. These are the ovulation test strips that I've used. So I'll even open one to show you. You can pee on the stick. I personally didn't trust myself to like accurately do this. So I would use a cup, and I would pee in a cup, and then I would dip this in it. And there's a marker line where you don't want the liquid to go over that line. And you just leave it in there for, it says like 5 seconds. I would kind of wait until it kind of filled up a little bit. You'll notice the color change. And then you wait about 5 minutes, you lie it flat on the counter, and then it'll show up as positive or negative. And there is, on the box, there's a marker of how you can read it. I'll also link these below. They're pretty cheap. They're on Amazon. I would get them in a pack of like 50 or 100, especially if you're going to be trying and you are not sure of when you're ovulating, or you're making adjustments to your cycle and things are changing and you're going to be tracking things a bit differently. These are just really good to have. So I always have my clients start tracking ovulation about 5 days before they expect it. If for whatever reason you don't get a positive test that month, that means you should be starting even earlier, because did we miss that window, or is your body not ovulating correctly? So that's also an indicator. If you're not getting a positive test strip, that means your body might not be ovulating, which means you're not going to be able to get pregnant. So it's just like another indicator of like, are you ovulating? Because Basically, what this measures is the LH surge, which is a hormone that spikes before ovulation happens. So when you get the positive test strip, that means that ovulation is going to happen anywhere in the next 12 to 36 hours, and that can change each month. There's no way of scientifically 100% accurately pinpointing when you ovulate every single month, because each woman's a little bit different. Each cycle can be a little different. Like, let's say 1 month you ovulate within 12 hours of getting that test strip. Well, some women it might be like a day or a day and a half later, and like that's okay. It's just trying to understand kind of the gist and what the regular markers are for your cycle. So that's when you would start tracking for ovulation, and then making sure that you're marking when you get a positive test strip. I can certainly go into another video if you guys want on how to be trying within your fertility window, but basically what that positive test strip means is like you've now entered more of your like very fertile window. So you actually can get pregnant before you get a positive test strip, because sperm can stay alive in a woman's body for up to 5 days. So let's say, so especially like some women will use this technique of not getting pregnant, but just knowing like, hey, if you have intercourse on day 20, like 2 days before you get a positive test strip, you actually can still get pregnant. So it's just really interesting to understand this, and we can certainly go into how to like kind of lay out the calendar too of trying, but definitely marking when you get a positive test strip. So basically I tell my clients, and how I used it for myself is like, you'll ovulate in the next like 1 to 3 days, and that's essentially when you can also be trying. Okay, so now we're going to track when you would get your period. So let's say my cycle was 28 days, I ovulated on day 18, we would then count out for when I would expect my period. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and then I would get my period roughly on August 2nd. So what this then does is give us a visual representation of what my cycle was, basically. So ovulation around day 18, and then let's say my period starting on August 2nd, that would only be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, roughly 10 days. That could certainly be 9 days. It could be 8 days, like depending on when my body actually ovulated, it might not even be a full 10-day luteal phase. So even just understanding ovulation can change a little bit, which can then adjust the luteal phase. So the luteal phase is extremely important to have a marker of, because after you ovulate to when you get your period, that's when the lining of your uterus is starting to thicken and prepare your body for an egg implantation. This happens every single cycle, whether we're trying to have a baby or not. So basically our period is shedding that lining of the uterus when we're not pregnant. So that lining builds up every single month. It's anticipating having an egg fertilized, and you need enough time within that window for progesterone to rise enough to be able to thicken that lining enough for an egg to be able to implant. So that's when I knew that was my cycle issue that I needed to focus on, was I wasn't having enough time for progesterone to make that lining as thick and as squishy as possible for a fertilized egg to be able to implant. There were a few times when we were trying with our first child that I felt a few months that we had gotten pregnant, and I realized, I was like, okay, there's also 3 steps to getting pregnant. One is making sure you're ovulating correctly, because if you're not ovulating, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. Ovulation is the drop of an egg. So if you're not dropping an egg, there's no way that you can get pregnant, because that egg obviously needs to be fertilized with a sperm. So that's step 1. Step 2 is your egg and your partner's sperm coming together to create a fertilized egg. If something is wrong with your husband's sperm or your partner's sperm, and something for whatever reason of you two not coming together, that is like more where couples are going to need more of a medical intervention like IVF, or considering other options for having children if for whatever reason they can't come together to make a fertilized egg. So that's step 2. And then step 3 is implantation, and making sure that the egg implants correctly. So that was essentially where I knew I needed to dive deeper and really trying to optimize my progesterone and moving ovulation up to a correct window. So the math of your cycle is going to be really important, of just helping you understand where your cycle is at. And it's a good indicator when you start trying of like, okay, now I'm understanding the flow of my body, the pattern of my body. I would actually do this observation for about 2 months just to kind of recognize any patterns. And then when we started trying for baby number 2, because I've been on the fertility journey for baby number 2, The same thing happened with my cycle. My body went exactly back to where it was when we were trying the first time, a 28-day cycle and ovulating on day 18. So on its own, that's where my body just wanted to hang at. And I did need to give my body a boost every single time I've been wanting to get pregnant. So I share that with you because a lot of women don't know the math of our cycle and how simple math can help us like dive in deeper for understanding what our hormones are doing. And it's a really easy thing to look at and observe. And then once we have that data, we can be like, okay, how am I going to move forward? Okay, so let's say you want to use an app instead for tracking your cycle. I like the Clue app. I found that it updates the best, especially if you're going to be making changes for your cycle. Whereas the other ones, like, even though I would indicate like things had changed, they would still predict my cycle for what my old one was at. And I just love this one. It literally updates from like 1 month and it'll just be like, okay, here's where your body's at. So to track, you kind of bring up your app. So let's say today would be the first day of my period. You would go on the bottom where it says track, click that button, and you would say, you basically mark the flow of your period for it to be able to recognize that your period started. So let's say it's light because it's the first day, and then you click done. So then to be able to like really use this information, you would go in every day of your cycle, just mark down what the flow is like. You can certainly track other symptoms. I don't, because I actually don't get any other symptoms. So it really just depends on like what you want to do for your cycle. So then that's marking when your period starts. Then you would go back in, let's say again, today I ovulated. You would hit track and you basically scroll over. They have like a couple different things you can be tracking. So one is you can track your cervical mucus. So this will start making changes as you're about to ovulate. It becomes more watery, there becomes more of it. It can kind of appear like stringy a little bit. And this is a really good fertility marker too. So it's signs that your body is showing about fertility. So I like to track that just so I can understand like, okay, roughly how many days before I ovulate am I then getting that? So then you can scroll over. They have quite a few, and they have a marker for any sort of like test results, including ovulation and pregnancy. So you would go in and say, okay, I got a positive ovulation test strip, and then you would click done. So then it marks your ovulation. So then you would go back in when your period starts to be able to track it that way. And then you can count from when you got the positive test to when your period started to understand what phase your luteal phase is in. I like using an app the best. I don't really put it on my calendar. Some people do, some people don't. So it really just depends on what works for you and the best way for you to remember to do this. I think that's key, is just making it work for your lifestyle and your system. I liked having a separate space and not necessarily having it on my calendar. And it just, that's what I mean, that's why the apps are designed to be able to have that. So it really just depends on what works for you. So what I needed to do when I was fixing, if you end up having a short luteal phase, I can link the video that I have about that too, of a short luteal phase, where it's basically like a pregnancy or trying to conceive issue where it's called a luteal phase defect, which I don't really like the name of that, but it's basically having too low progesterone in terms of getting pregnant. So I had to move ovulation up by a few days. So I needed to be ovulating about here on day 14, 15 for a 28-day cycle to be able to have like a 12, 13, 14-day luteal phase, depending on when my body was actually ovulating. So I hope that helps in just terms of how to track your cycle for fertility, how to count your luteal phase length, how to pinpoint ovulation, and then just using it as a marker of, do you need to dive deeper? Because I know there's a lot of information out there on just like, yeah, just start trying. And like, if you're like me, like you want to optimize and you want to, if you're going to be trying, especially if you're very serious about it, you want like the most bang for your buck. Like, and if there is anything that you need to fix, it can take 2, 3 to 6 months for your body to come into alignment. For me, each time I was trying to conceive, it took 3 months for my body to come into an alignment to be optimized for fertility. Some women, depending on their hormones, might be longer, some might be shorter. It really is very individual depending on what your hormones are at, what your genetics are like, age, like just all these things come into play. So I will link the videos and these ovulation test strips if you'd like to get some in the description below. And if you have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments and I'm always here.